Now, for researchers in the audience, please don't ask me questions about correlation research, because I'm not a researcher, I'm a communicator. But I understand that what correlation research means, and the validity of this slide, is predicated on the relationship to how a number of questions were asked in relationship one to the other. And I know that by design, my 16 attributes, as you will recall here, are pretty generic, right? Treats employees well. What that means in China is extremely different from what that means in Spain, is extremely different from what that means in Mississippi. Very different. So for an enterprise, I need to understand these generic attributes in the context of my industry at my moment in time. And I need to understand how to move those. What we did was we identified some behaviors. We moved from attribute generic to behavior specific. Pays appropriate level of tax. What does that do? Does it impact? Yes, it's extremely important. 8 in 10 global respondents say that it's important that the enterprise pays the appropriate level of tax. And we know that in relationship to our trust-building performance clusters, that impacts engagement, integrity, and purpose. I can measure this impact. I can measure this move. More importantly, I can prove that positive behaviors impact the two most important trust-building clusters. And it also matters who moves that message. We saw earlier the CEO at the bottom of the trust level from a spokesperson standpoint. Here we looked at content across the clusters, engagement, integrity, the most important, and we asked who was the most trusted influencer to communicate on each. The CEO, the employee, an activist, consumer, academic, or media. 52% employee, 41% integrity. Engaging employees, understanding the objective of the enterprise, and empowering them to engage across social media is critical in order to build trust. Not an opinion, it's a fact. So what is the CEO going to do? Sit in their office? No, they still, that diamond is still predicated on something from top down. The vision of the enterprise, the strategy of the enterprise, the priorities of the enterprise have to be owned at the top. But they must not just be forced, they must come from the bottom up, right? He or she must engage with employees. And this doesn't mean don't be in the media. It just says for a CEO who thinks the only thing they need to do is do the press conference at the time of the big announcement. This is not enough. Again, not our opinion as marketing communication professionals, factual data. We believe that this is all data that supports a new environment. There's been significant change in our jobs over the past 5 years, much less my 20-year experience. We also believe that the job of the CEO has changed. That's the fundamental message that we have to take back to our clients, to our bosses, is that the CEO has got to become the chief engagement officer. Does it mean that their job in totality has changed? No, they're still responsible for vision. Our belief at Edelman is that if the role of the CEO has historically been this large in terms of job responsibility, and communications was this much of it, that in today's world, the transformation that we've seen because of social, digital, etc., means that communications is this much of it. It doesn't mean that the other responsibility sets are gone, but it means that the CEO must create a culture and atmosphere and behavior of engagement. That the CEO must be the leader when it comes to speaking to, engaging with NGOs and third parties. That the CEO must resource and decide that internal communications matters. That this is not just a branding exercise. It's not just a PR exercise. That there is no delineation between these two things. That these two things are engaged. These two things are merged, and the CEO has to drive that in the way the organization moves forward. And we believe the three-step process is to participate, advocate, and evaluate in terms of how to move that enterprise forward. So that's a lot of data on a very emotionally based topic, and I hope that gives us a good bit to talk about over the course of the day. And I thank you very much for your time and your attention. What
muchas gracias. Y nos ha roto los esquemas de la puntualidad anglosajona. Nos ha hecho que tengamos que reconfigurar la agenda.
Yes, I started late. I started a lot late. I was wondering if you were watching the time when I started.
This discussion to the conference. Vamos a acordar un poquito el café, por favor. Están ahí esperando las tazas humeantes. En 10 minutos, 15 minutos máximo volvemos a la sala. Gracias.